Meeting to order. It is Monday, March 16th, and we are being filmed by, do we have a new name yet?
Chat TV.
Chat TV? Chat TV. Okay. So tonight's agenda, we're meeting with the selectmen, discuss appointing Linda Braga to the Finance Committee, mail, reserve fund transfers, approval of meeting minutes, a meeting with Silver Lake and Halifax Elementary Schools, that's an appointment at 7:45. Discussion of the current fiscal year FY15 and the upcoming fiscal year FY16 budget. Review the spending year to date. Public participation, and discussion of upcoming meeting dates and agenda. Okay? And we're going to try to rush through tonight. So up first, the Board of Selectmen. Thank you guys for all coming. And Linda is here as well. So, do you guys want to kind of run right now? So you can ask Linda.
I already asked her if she wanted to join. She said you guys needed the help.
Well, that's kind of what we.
No, on a serious note, if I may, was the chairperson.
I'm hiding back here. The corner seat was taken.
Sorry.
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Why do you want to be a part of the finance committee?
I want to contribute to my community. So I've been living here about a year now, and I want to bring my strengths to the town and help in any way I can.
And what might be those strengths?
I'm very good with finance. I do it for my company that I work with. I work with budgets over $100 million, and we do year-to-year savings. So I think fresh eyes don't hurt.
Convince me,
Do you want to go, Mike?
No, you're not. You're like into it. What?
I am. I'm always into it because I'm so happy every time I see somebody who's interested in joining one of the committees. So you mentioned that you've been in town for about a year.
Yes.
Have you attended town meeting
I
yet?
have not.
Have you ever attended a town meeting?
No, so I'm still learning how to get information. A lot of that information I get is off the Halifax locals, and it's a little after the fact.
Sure.
That, and I just got my name corrected on the voting.
Oh, so
registration.
now you're officially a
Yeah.
registered voter.
So
We won't blame Bob at the court.
it happens. It's
yes.
probably my handwriting.
Yes.
Um,
So that's exciting.
but I will make best efforts to attend as many as I can.
Do you feel like you understand the process of which the town meeting process, that everybody who attends town meeting actually makes the final vote on the recommendation?
I do. I did some research today just to inform myself before I got here on how things work, and I found some committee articles online off Mass.gov, so educated myself a little bit.
So I'm a former member of the Finance Committee, so I have a soft spot for this particular department. But I think that when you sit on the Finance Committee, you really have a good sense of, at the end of the year, the different functions of the departments and how that sort of comes together to create the puzzle of Halifax. And so, is there a particular area that you feel that you want to focus on, or are you just open to any parts of the government?
I'm open to everything. I don't think any one is more important than the other. I'm very interested in the school only because I see a lot more debate about the school, but other than that, I'm open to everything.
And do you have any questions about their meeting schedule or what their role is as far as...
Can you hear what she's saying? Oh, right.
I'm sure they explained to you how they all have particular liaisons to different departments, and that it would be your responsibility to sort of get to know the department's budget on your own. And so you're never really an advocate for your department, that particular department, but you should be able to have a good grasp of that person or that department's budget.
Yes.
And so it's really hard, because once you have a liaison for a little bit, you tend to have sort of a soft spot for it. So it's important to sort of just know that you're auditing the line items, and to bring it back to be able to speak to the department, the rest of the committee, about the needs of that department. So that's the only piece of advice that I would give.
Thank you.
Yeah, you kind of develop a bond with the departments you go to amongst committee members. Like Kim says, your soft spot, but you are a liaison for your committee, and you're not an advocate for them. You hear the positives, the negatives, and you bring your opinions to the board, because not everybody can go to the same departments and do the same thing that you can. That's why they're all split up. So as long as you keep that in mind, just your willingness to do it. is admirable, and I for one appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just one last question. Is there anything in your life, anything that you feel with you're working with the boards, the time schedule, anything like that?
Not in the foreseeable future now.
John Bruno, do you have a question? John Bruno's our moderator.
No, I don't. I think we have, the vote though is one of you, one of them and me, is that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Who's them?
Who's them?
One of them is the selectmen them?
Yeah.
Is the selectmen them or the finance committee them?
Each of you, I think
Each of us.
each of you have one.
You,
people.
them, yes, right? Aren't you sensitive to that?
Yeah.
Well,
John is also a former member.
I never had been to a town meeting until I was on the finance committee either, and I did it for a long time ago, and it's good. You'll learn more from the finance committee than you can anywhere else in town. It's a great place to start. Great place to be also,
Yeah.
but it's a great place to start.
It really is. You'll really enjoy it.
You
Yeah.
don't need to be able to do math, because I can't.
I think
There's always somebody around. My eyes glaze over
I think-
when you start talking about numbers.
I think it's important to be independent, to be an independent thought, to be an independent voice, not to be part of the crowd, and that's what makes the difference for all these members. They all have independent voices, they all have different thought, and that's what everybody brings to the committee, and that's a good thing. I mean, only being in town a year and wanting to jump in the deep end of the pool, because this is the deep end of the pool, is going to be, it's going to be a little tough, and hope to see you at town meeting. You'll be behind the table with the rest of them. That's one strange way to start a town meeting, but have you seen any on tape? Have you seen any meetings on?
No, I just found out that you could actually watch them on television, so I'm going to do that.
We just actually just kind of
Have
started.
you guys given her a
Doing
tough
that.
line?
Right. But so there's going to be a huge learning curve, so don't feel that we're all here to help you
Thank you.
to get acclimated, and don't feel overburdened or overstressed, because new things are always a little tough to learn. But everybody's it's a great time to learn, and so
We're lucky to have you. You're very impressed by your application.
Oh, thank you.
And again, it can be very challenging and a little stressful at times, but it's so rewarding. So thank you.
One
So
last
who makes-
thing. Don't take things to heart. In other words, don't get it personal with you. Stressing over it all the time, because it'll kill you.
I heard you. Okay, I got it.
this is a 3-vote. I'd like to make a motion to appoint. What was it again?
Linda
Linda
Braga.
Linda. Sorry, Linda.
Is it
I'm
Braga
terrible at
or-
names.
Is it
I
Braga?
forget my name.
Braga.
Braga.
To
To,
a term
to
to
the
expire
zoning,
when? When's the
to
term
the
expiring, Kendra?
June
Thank you.
15th, 2017.
Same time I need.
do I have a second?
Day after December, I think.
Second? Joe. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Unanimous, you're in.
Thank you.
All right, pull up a chair.
And just one last thing, I saw some members of my advisory board for Plymouth County, and everybody's in bad shape. If they don't have a contract signed by April 1st, half the people are going to be laid off, the worst, the commissioner's office, the treasurer's office. It's bad.
At the Plymouth County
At
level?
the county level, layoffs,
Because of what?
budgetary constraints. I don't, that's the number.
Okay.
You're all done with me, right?
Yep, thank you very much.
Bye, John. Nice to see you. See you in May.
Barbara's here.
Gotta have
Yeah.
Mike, I need your signature.
Please, when you get sworn in.
Needs to get sworn in.
Thank you, Barbara.
You swear to perform the duties incumbent upon. Take 2. Do you swear to perform the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Finance Committee for the town of Halifax, according to the bylaws of Halifax and laws of the Commonwealth, to your knowledge and ability, so help you God?
Congratulations. Oh, you're still new. You're still a newbie.
There you go.
Yes,
If you feel
she
comfortable.
said school, yes.
Only if you feel comfortable. If you want to sit there, you can.
As long as they didn't break it, step in
Get to
front
go
of
on
it.
the chair.
Yeah.
Jump in with both feet.
Doesn't matter where.
Wherever you want to sit.
Or if
Sit
you
on
want
this
to put it in
side.
a corner, yeah.
Thank you.
That way you're not.
And look at that.
Here you go.
Troy, you want a smoothie, you want...
Yes.
Reminder, she has a hearing and paid number.
Okay. That's part of it. So, it's like
I will have a free reminder for you.
Yeah, Kim already got behind the column
So-
over there.
I know. It's
with Stu Hall. Stu, Julianne, Peg, Nikki, Peg,
Is hearing impaired.
that's what she told me to tell you.
I'll speak up.
Okay,
So that I don't have to keep saying, what? What?
okay.
You call me a what? No.
So we have, the mail is the next thing up, and we'll go through that. And then, Kendra, before you go down.
Do you want me to?
I don't think there's anything.
Ken, did you want me?
I'll go.
So here,
I could use a walk.
here's the
I
list.
dropped my
I
glasses.
took the staple of, this is the
If he
map.
shed,
And it's the white thing.
no, it must be very
So,
hard plastic.
get
because
copies
he
of that.
shed. I called up, I have new frames coming, but they're not in yet.
Copies of that one.
It's not in yet. Okay.
That's one.
I wouldn't see it, I got it, they
It's
$20.
straight.
Oh, I know, you have to keep telling.
Well,
One hand.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I know, but my kids were small, they wore glasses.
Yeah, you
Oh,
Got a
yeah,
scratch
always
when I was
taking
doing
them out.
football.
And then, I can't remember how many pairs of glasses my family
This is
owns
like-
at the bottom of that.
I see it now.
Those
This
kids
is like-
wear it out in a boat,
Do you know if
and you know, I
everyone's
bought
coming
them
from
things
that
to hitch
elementary?
to it.
I believe Summer's on vacation right now, but we are expecting the 4 other.
Four.
They'd be out in the
Yeah.
boat, they come home and say, Ma, I lost my
That's 6.
glasses. Did you lose them?
And John.
Oh, well, you know, they just go down there and they get caught up with all that silk.
Yeah, because
This
it's
is the
not.
assessment from last year.
Yeah.
But you want these all in one?
I don't know.
One unit, so you combine them?
Oh, they take it out to go fishing. And then, you know, they wouldn't have brains enough to take them off or to put something on them.
I don't think anything's supposed
Funniest story.
And no, yeah, but they
No,
do
it's
just
just
do it
little.
once.
Oh, buddy. Okay, good.
The
same kid did it more than
funniest story
Well, I
I can
had
tell you about the lake.
3 kids
is
who
my
wore
brother
glasses. 2 of them kept blue.
Candy.
back in the out in the
More than
canoe.
once.
Candy.
2 of them each did it.
Sure?
My brother.
Charles, do you-
All birdies.
Do you know what Sandy said you
One
updated
little perch, and you still
spreadsheet?
turn the canoe over. I don't think so, I'll check.
Did lose it?
You died, you couldn't find it, so it's still on the bottom.
It would be like you went to a basketball game and then you didn't. Is there more currency?
I've been to interesting meetings before.
So,
Than what we have?
did, Mrs. Slager, did you
Yes.
guys actually vote
Presents.
on the changes to the budget? Did
Not
you
yet.
make a version 2?
No, we had a second version that we reviewed, but no actual vote has been taken on it yet. We were waiting for the governor's numbers to come in.
Okay. Okay. So, no, then we don't have an update from that side. So,
Gordon,
yes,
well, that is March 12th, is that what you need?
Yeah, I think the last one we got was the 9th. The new summer's last one.
I
yes.
believe we do. Summer's on vacation, but from what I understand, the remaining 4 are supposed to be here.
Yeah.
Does anyone know where we are?
And you're not
Or the
on.
remaining 3, I should
Is
say.
it Jenny?
I think it was the March 3rd.
We did, yeah, that's what Gordon said. That's why I asked if there was an updated one, but I don't, is it in the binder? We need like a table of contents.
Oh.
What are you looking for? School? Oh, you're not gonna have that in binder.
Okay, so we don't.
You're not gonna have it. The only thing I sent to Gordon and the town accountant was the copy of the front page, which is all that was passed out at the meeting.
So Charlie's gonna make a printout of those, and then we'll get copies.
Not even in this actual. I thought we looked at something, didn't we? I'm confused.
I thought she gave us an update on the revenue page, but we made a change to, Well,
The capital plan?
no, the actual budget
Assessment?
spreadsheet that Sandy does. So Charlie's gonna print out the latest copy,
Okay.
Okay.
and then we'll make copies of that.
Are you taking up copies of this?
That's what Charlie's making, right?
Charlie's making a copy
Oh,
of
The
this.
newest one of
The
these.
newest one of these with the revenue, with the
Oh, good.
expenditure.
I thought we got one of those at the last meeting.
They keep updating them, right?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and there was also a change to the regional transportation that wasn't correct
Okay.
on the, well, it doesn't really affect our budget side of things, but
So what about that? Are you getting a copy of that?
version 2, no,
Oh, no.
but you will,
What?
right now.
Oh,
Sorry, just, things are all scattered up.
that's okay. I just didn't know if we meant like next week.
Nikki, you got them all just conglomerated.
I'm all wound up. I don't know what I
Really got a good impression
I find you when I can get it to.
from your newest member. Then if I may be so bold, you say you've only been in town a year. Where was your former residence?
Previously to Halifax, I was in Quincy, but I grew up in Fall River.
Fall in the river?
Fall River, Massachusetts. You did? My boyfriend grew up in Quincy. It's hard for him to
Then you have an idea what she's like.
yeah, feisty there.
Feisty, I don't know.
See, I grew up in Chicago. I have no idea what you guys do down here.
You haven't lived here long enough to get the land.
Ako word development, siya na si. Siya
I'm
Now
not
you're
telling
gonna share
you
how
yet.
long you've lived in Halifax. How long is it now?
42 years now.
You discovered it.
Hold on for a minute. Oh, God, it hurt.
But he's still not considered a town.
The only time you become a county if you get somebody in one of the graveyards and tell them, "What is it by here?" And you're still not a county.
My children.
Thanks, Barbara. That was a good qualification to become one of the
Is that you had to be born here? Right, yeah.
born and educated.
I don't know, I just know that I've been to a
Well,
lot of
there's a
different.
lot of them that aren't educated, so we won't go there.
I've been here since 1988, and I'm not a teenager.
Because you weren't born here.
Yeah.
I came
But
here
my
in
children-
1973.
I came in the same bus.
You came in 88?
Yeah.
73.
Yeah, they dropped us off and we're in no man's
Kids
land.
while you were here, or did you have
No, I came down with 1.5. No, I was pregnant. She was pregnant when we came down. So the rest of them, basically, all my kids were born in Framingham. I drove down 495, each one of them first, all the way up to Framingham. Because that's where her doctor was.
Oh, okay.
Is that
She
just
didn't
a
want me to be
weapon
a
now?
doctor, she wanted family.
More or less.
I can understand that.
The last
Protected from all
one,
those women chasing
no, my
you.
life,
Now that you're
teacher.
No, I can't run so fast.
Mother and father lived in Marlboro,
Triple.
who I met at Cotton Springs. We drove all the way down the highway, she's all the way. Got to the mother's house, dropped, threw the 2 kids out of the car, you know, and got to the hospital. I went to get out of the car, and my side, the wheel dropped off.
The wheel of the car?
I had just had new tires stuck around, they hadn't tightened up, both of them. The wheel dropped off just as I get out of the car.
Kendra's making.
That's a crazy birth story.
I'm all the way from I'm trying to get her into the pen. I got there 10 minutes late for the delivery.
Because the wheel fell off the car.
Yeah,
But you made it.
Yeah, but he doesn't tell you, he's the one that tried to put the car on.
It was Susan Roebuck gave me a whole new set of tires and everything. I was ready to own them.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting, are there any other updates, like, outside that you guys can think of?
Talk to either one of those guys, I know nothing.
From outside the town that affect us, that you guys can think of?
That-
Spring is 6 days away.
For,
in case you didn't know that.
Are you talking about revenues?
Revenue, expenditures.
Well,
Yeah,
to
no,
fix the snow and ice budget.
We don't have an update from that either.
No, we
No.
don't. We don't have an
They
update.
didn't plow
but if I may elaborate on that, what I told you earlier.
Yeah.
It blew me away when I found out, because I was talking to several people out there, and everybody's talking about nobody in the commissioner's office would be there, at least one person under the treasurer's office, and several other individual departments, registered stuff, people will get laid off if they can't come to an accord with the unions.
Oh, it's union driven. It's not funded. Oh.
Well, it's funded too, because what they're asking for is cutting into the funds in order to meet their demands and
Oh,
let people off.
They've been selling off land, right? The county has
There's
been.
no more land for sale.
So all the one-time revenue is gone, basically.
That's it.
That's a trouble.
There's still some land that's available. They wanted, it was supposed to go out, at least it's for like an Instar and National Grid, you know, and for windmills and
Yeah.
everything. And for some reason, it fell through. They changed itself. They have no funds. We're trying to get all the money that the state owes. The state's supposed to be paying a certain percentage of the monies that they receive from rental to court. The state rents the court.
And they haven't been doing that for
They
years.
haven't been doing that for years, or the maintenance fees. Say if it cost us $30 to do some particular maintenance, they're only required to give us $22 out of the 30. Or 80. You know, so you're always behind. You're paying the vendors and stuff full price, where the state's only reimbursing you. That's to that. So those are things that are being worked on and rental legislation to try to change. Just want to make sure you're aware that we're not alone. They do. Several people from several of the other towns are in just as, if not worse shape than we are. Bigger deficits than we have. And I realize we haven't got the one from, we still haven't got the school budget yet.
I know you're not going through the warrant for a while, because right now you need to get through budgets.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to mention that we did have another request for the South Shore Women's Center to go on the warrant. I don't know what your decision is on the funding of that, but I wanted to let you know that came in. I believe the Cape Cod Legal.
South Coastal.
South Coastal Legal.
That's the
came in.
legal one.
Yeah.
We always have those.
Yeah, we always have those,
Yeah,
but
they
there's
always
one
do, always
new,
push
there's
it.
one additional one, and that was the
Community
coalition,
action.
yeah, community action from funding. Again, we haven't made a decision on any recommendation for funding, I just wanted you to be aware, if you haven't looked at the warrant, that those are in there. And then capital plans meeting on Wednesday, we're gonna meet with recycling to go over the purchase of the new recycling truck.
Okay. Is that 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
7?
Yes. Yeah.
And may I ask one question?
Yeah.
Now,
Somebody handed it to me from the, you did. I didn't get the thing that goes on.
You want the same?
No, I don't really need that.
We need to look at it, they haven't come to us yet.
Oh, there we go.
if you look closely at that, you see there's a dent
So it
in
James is
the,
still sore.
in the platform.
Yeah, it's gonna like
There's a dent
sort
right there,
everything.
don't
Oh, I see.
It's bigger, so
Guess
it,
who put that in there?
you don't have to go back and forth so many times.
Yeah.
If anybody's interested in coming at 6 o'clock and just hearing about it, we're gonna be hearing about it for the first time, so.
I go to the elementary school at 6.
I think,
okay.
I think my remember, it was about my third year in office, and former selectman was given harassing us.
Okay. Did you get a response?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
He said a former selectman was harassing him, so he put a dent in the.
I was just trying to keep them in order. Okay, it was you. I was the chair.
Who else would it be? I missed something. I was talking with the.
No, we didn't get the notes. We did get one piece of
Oh, I was
mail.
very good as a selectman, not like I am.
Okay.
He has no discipline.
Meeting will come to order.
Yeah,
So we got mail. To the town clerk from the selectman's assistant dated March 11th, the resignation of Karen Faber. At its meeting held on March 10th, the Board of Selectmen accepted with regret the resignation of Karen Faber from the Finance Committee effective immediately. So we have one opening on the Finance Committee at this point in time. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would move that the committee write to Karen a letter very similar to the one we wrote to
Peter.
when Summer retired, you know, because she did serve a long time and she did a lot of homework. She always was ready when she came to a meeting. I was always very impressed with what Karen did.
Okay.
So I think we should thank her for her service and wish her well and tell her if she's ever available, we'd welcome her back.
I
Okay.
agree. I second it, either motion.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Okay. So Kendra made copies of a whole bunch of handouts that I had. We're at 7:45 is the appointment, so do we want to just, yeah.
You can pass them around. That would be extremely helpful. There's
I didn't give her the last two, I didn't give her the last two sheets, so.
So I just have to
That's the whole
do
thing.
them as we go.
Down to the home.
We all get one. This one's yours.
Oh, this is an updated one?
This is, Stu has one, you have one.
You're good?
Yeah.
You might be hitting it back.
I'm just gonna put them together and then I'll pass them
The
over.
whole budget summary.
So Charlie's working on that. So as soon as we
Bear
get
with me
that.
1 minute and I'll have them for everyone else.
You mean the staple?
They are stable, except for the retarding team.
Yes.
Look in the drawer there.
So
Yeah.
just to give everybody an update on what's in the packet. Silver Lake School Committee passed out a draft at their meeting on Thursday for a capital plan, long-term equipment, buildings and grounds improvement maintenance plan. So they handed this out at the meeting, so I want to make sure everyone had that. There's also a assessment worksheet.
Is this the same?
It's 2 pages.
Was it
Using
revised?
version 2 of the budget from Silver Lake. This is Mary McKinnon's
Doesn't have any.
assessment. This isn't official. This is our estimate. Yeah, it's got the numbers here in the center. It's the official formula. Just the topic in our worksheet are off by a few dollars, so there's some adjustments that need to take place. Questions of regional transportation that I was talking about earlier. DESI has one number listed, there's another number listed on the cherry sheet, so there's a difference. And so the slides that I passed out earlier that had the increases that we originally received in the budget numbers calculation. There's a copy of the 2015. There's a copy of the 2015 assessment. That assessment was what we received in an email from Mr. Tuffy that Charlie passed along to us. So that's the 2015. That's the current fiscal year's assessment. That's the one that we. Okay, and then, like I said, the 3 slides from the presentation that I gave to the selectmen. Mr. Schlegel, did I give you guys these, or did I just talk about the numbers?
I believe I have a copy here.
Okay. So I think I gave these out at the elementary school, our meeting, the selectmen, and Silver Lake. And it just does the calculation for the average bill, and it has that increase. There's a copy of the enrollment numbers for Silver Lake and Halifax Elementary with a calculation on the second page of what that means to the union and what it means to Silver Lake assessment percentage. And I think that should be everything that's in the packet.
Is this current enrollment as of
Yes.
right now?
Yeah,
Or
so
future?
as of,
October 1st, 2014.
so as of October 1st, 2014, that's the assessment for this upcoming fiscal year. The enrollment's set as of October 1st.
Shows enrollment in schools. Back of the packet, second to last page of the packet that the board gave us.
Oh, the other. I don't think I have that page.
It's in this packet. And it was copied off a different colored paper, so it has a little, right there. That's the enrollment numbers. And then the last 2 pages are the Silver Lake budget for FY16 version 2. And then there's a list of cuts that were taken from their draft budget. So that's listed here. And you'll see that some of these items on the cuts are now on the capital plan that's in that 7 pages. So that's what we have for handouts. And then Charlie just gave us the updated spreadsheet. So at our last meeting, we talked about using the state aid numbers. So we received them the last meeting. So we're going to use the Chapter 70 for this year. I believe we were going to use the Chapter 70 for this year and the unrestricted aid for the... It says here that we use the FY15 numbers for Chapter 70 and unrestricted. All the other numbers agree with the governor's budget numbers. So the expenses are updated, but we level funded the Chapter 70 and unrestricted aid. But we included the increase on the veterans and so I thought we were going to use the updated Chapter 70 number and level fund the unrestricted.
I agree, I think that's what we voted on.
Yeah, I think that's what we said.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to double check that number. That on the 3rd page of the handout, when you look at the top where it says education and then Chapter 70, it looks like we level funded that, but I thought we were going to include the $17,000 for the increase there. So we need to just double check that with Sandy.
So the 2699 is that in there?
Yeah, I think it should be,
Are you looking for a vote?
yeah.
It was at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, like the last meeting.
Last meeting?
Yeah.
I'm not going to get to the cherry sheet here anyway. I think I took a copy. Let's see if it's still on there. It's still not there. This is for Silver Lake.
Federal fund chapter 70 and unrestricted global.
Oh, you said it on the front both?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so should we change that to use the governor's number for Chapter 70 for this year?
Did his number go up or down?
His number was up by $20 per student.
Didn't Kim or somebody say though, that number is pretty much, they wouldn't vote the governor down on that? That was
Yeah,
pretty much
that's,
count
I
on that
thought,
number?
I thought that's why
The
we,
Chapter 70?
yeah. I thought that's why,
Yeah. I believe that's what Kim said last meeting.
I don't have Wi-Fi's not, so I'm on the phone.
Gordon, what are you looking for?
The chapter 70 off the governor's cherry sheet
Yeah.
for Halifax.
You're looking for the exact amount?
Yeah.
Okay, well, give me a minute.
This cherish, this one? Did she pass that last one?
Are you comfortable with that number?
No, that's the
Yeah,
assessment.
Yeah, if I'm gonna that one, if I'm gonna pick one of the two, I think 1570.
Paula, did you get both copies? Did you get the, and Casey?
No, I only have one.
Charlie, did you have?
I'm pulling it up.
Okay.
Just so everybody knows, John and Joy are still in Clinton.
Okay. So, only person we're missing is Derek Brown.
I did not hear from Derek whether he would be here tonight or not.
Okay, and do you know if Ed was coming?
Ed said he would try, he wasn't sure the last time I talked to him.
Gordon,
Yes.
the chapter 70 governor's number is 2,711,657.
657. Okay. Did everyone hear that? 2711657. That's the chapter 70 from the governor's budget. That's for the Halifax Elementary's chapter 70 number.
What's the difference?
1 second, I'll tell you.
11,840.
11,840?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. That's the year-over-year increase?
From the number,
Yeah.
yeah, from last year.
Okay. We're seeing. Okay. So that's the only other thing that's different than what we talked about, right? We said that we should use the governor's number for chapter 70. Yes? Okay, so we have preliminary annual town meeting information for the warrant articles. These are the items that have been given to capital plan. These are just an updated list for right now.
And Gordon,
Yes.
you know, when you're ready for it, I have drafts for both the special, I sent it out, but I printed it out. The annual I got done about half an hour ago, and I'll have copies when you're ready to take a look at the entire warrant.
Okay. Charlie, do you have more copies of the,
Of what you wanted from,
yeah, for
Sealy?
the school committee members?
Sure.
So, you have them on top here?
Okay, who needs one of Sandy's stuff?
Paula, Bob, Robert, Casey, Summer.
I'll be happy to do them.
And Kim, did you get a copy?
I'm trying to look for something. I can't find it 'cause I have so much.
Who doesn't have a copy of Sandy's stuff?
I don't know what that is, but I'll.
Well, you don't have one, okay, no, I need to make more.
Oh.
1, 2, anybody else?
If Ed comes in, probably just.
Sure, well, let me make more than 2 then.
Okay. Thank you, Charlie.
Kim, do you have this?
I do, thank you.
To the. Mrs. Slater, Paula, does Paula have that one?
As you know,
Bob's got it, Summer, Casey. Okay. Okay. Derek's here? All right, so once everyone gets a copy of the paperwork, we'll start. Well, no, he's asked to make one for Derek. And Ed's here too. Good, so everyone's here. All right, so. Charlie gets them.
Charlie, one more.
But tomorrow.
Or they ask you if you want to be here at my vacation.
Here I am.
All right, so once Charlie comes back with those updated Sandy spreadsheet, the section that we'll be concentrating on are line items 74, so in the operating budget for the town, line item 74 is the elementary school. Line item 75 is vocational, that's out of district vocational. Line 76 is the special needs tuition. Line 77 is special needs transportation. Line 78 is the Silver Lake assessment. And line 79 is the debt exclusion for Silver Lake. So everyone has a copy of that. And I know it's a lot of paper, so. So the copy that everyone has of Sandy's spreadsheet has an updated number for line 74 was from the numbers that were discussed at the meeting, but were not voted as version 2. Just so everyone's aware of that. It's not version 1. It was the items that were discussed. So that's a decrease over what was originally requested. So if you look at an earlier budget, the earlier budget had listed $226,918 for the requested increase for the Halifax Elementary School. Right now, the increase is $138,637. So those numbers were updated from what you guys discussed at the meeting, but did not vote.
Were you reading that?
Correct.
So line 74.
74?
So those numbers were discussed, but were not voted. Just so everyone's clear on that. So if we go back and look, current budget has been changed by a few items from the point that we were at. We have a change, so right now, the deficit is listed as $96,564.55. So if you look at the second page on Sandy's handout, in the upper right-hand corner, we have where it says revenue less expenditure and appropriations. You have the full levy listed, and then you have the 96,000 is in parentheses, and that is the current deficit that we have.
What number is this related?
So the number for Silver Lake is level funded.
Level funded for operating, but not for the debt portion.
The debt has been updated to the
Yes.
correct number for our population. That number is 34.2% of the total debt, and the debt payment for this year is a little higher than last year total, but it's a decrease to us because our population went down. So when we talk about that item, that is on the debt exclusion side of things. So there is a decrease in the debt exclusion number, but the operating budget is an increase. Okay, so that's what we have currently listed as,
You don't mean it for operating budget isn't increased on this document?
not on this document, that just, that calculation.
So Gordon, did you put in any new assessment numbers in this or no? We're just
This
guessing?
is the spreadsheet from last week.
Okay.
So the only changes in this, from the items that we've received, are the $10,000 out of the police overtime wages and the numbers that were discussed at the elementary school meeting but have not been voted yet. So, and then, so it's a decrease in the elementary school budget and also a decrease in the vocational students line, which is line 75. It's a decrease of 2 students. So that's where those two numbers are why we went from a 254,000 deficit to a 96,000 deficit with the state aid numbers updated. Okay?
No, the firm, as far as
No. So as of April 1st, we will have an updated number of vocational not elementary, but
Vocational,
Vocational.
out-of-district vocational.
out-of-district vocational. April 1st, we should get a firm number. Yes?
They have until April 1st to apply.
Okay. So that number could change in the month of April as well.
It has
Good.
in years past, like
Yeah.
about 10 years ago, we had somebody that made the application after April 1st and we honored it. So you really haven't
So,
time.
okay,
As of right now, we know of 2 students.
okay,
We're holding a budget for
3,
an additional one just in case.
okay.
So
In this fiscal year that we're in now, FY15,
we budgeted for 5.
and how many do we have? Because we,
2, 3.
I think,
because we took money at the special town meeting out of that
Right.
line item.
yes.
Because we had 5 that were going. I
Okay.
believe one is a senior this year. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe one is a senior and is not graduating. So there's 2 definitely returning next year.
Okay. So,
And
That's-
2 didn't go this year.
And that surplus is, the rest of the surplus is needed to make up for a deficit on the sped side, so that's not going to be anything.
right, so we're not gonna be able to touch that at the special town meeting, other than to pay the deficit on the
Yes.
special needs.
Yes.
So when it comes time to talk about snow and ice deficit, that will not be available to spend. Okay. So, when is the elementary schools meeting next? Tuesday?
March 30th.
Will you guys be taking a vote on an updated budget?
We're going to discuss the budget. I'm not sure we're going to vote it because we're meeting a week later too for our regular meeting,
Okay,
which still, I believe, gives us the timeline to get a budget voted for the warrant,
okay.
I believe.
Well, I would just ask if there's changes in the budget that you know that you're gonna request, that you take a vote to update those line items. Not, just that way the numbers that the finance committee is looking at has been at least voted by you. It's not, it's still gonna move, but,
Yeah.
okay.
I know that we might be talking about some circuit breaker.
Okay,
I think John and Joy had said that they might have what they believe is a firm
okay.
at this point, or kind of, at least.
So the number that was discussed at that Silver Lake meeting was 65%.
Yeah.
Is that,
That's what they're thinking.
okay. So 65% reimbursement.
Changes the out-of-district.
Do you know approximately, is it 20,000?
I believe it's about 22,000. I left my piece of paper.
Per
Per
5%.
5%.
So I think Sandy had estimated it'd be about a $66,000 swing
And I think that's what John had said too. But
66.
In which direction?
to the better.
And so last year, or this current year, it's less than 65%?
This year it's,
This year it started out at 72%, but there has been 9 C cuts in it. So what it ends up with at the end, we're still not sure.
so what happened
But
at
we
least,
budgeted 65.
Yes.
So the increase wasn't something that was in our numbers.
Okay.
It would have been great if the town got it,
Yeah.
but it's not something we counted on. So as long as we don't go below 65% total for the year, we should make it out of the wash. I would have loved to see the extra, but
Would you be looking at that change at the April meeting? Would you feel more comfortable? Or really not until the middle of April because the House doesn't vote
I was
until
gonna say,
then?
I'm not gonna feel comfortable until we get some kind of a consensus from the House and the Senate that says this is what we agree on. The governor's budget is a great starting point, but it's so late this year. I just don't know where the House and Senate are gonna go.
Okay. Oh, okay, so those are the next two lines. That's line 76 and line 77. The next line is line 78, Silver Lake assessment. So currently, right now, we have that as a level funded assessment, because that's what we plugged in. We didn't get assessment estimates until this past week from at Silver Lake. So in the other handout, you'll see one that's got a gray square in the center. This is an estimated worksheet that Mary McKinnon and I created, which is very close to what Mr. Tuffy had for numbers at the Silver Lake meeting. It's off possibly by the regional transportation, because we had a different number. We updated it to his, but it should be in the stapled package.
Okay.
So, looking at that number, when you go to the second page, inside the square, this is using version 2 of the Silver Lake budget. It's estimated that Halifax will see a $20,000 decrease in the assessment at this point in time from last year. It's estimated. The possible problem with this is that Plimpton's municipal growth factor is listed at 6.06% increase. Halifax is 3.48, and Kingston is at 4.25-ish, someplace in there. And those are the numbers that DOR supplies to Department of Education. I went through that calculation numerous times just to double check everything. I really believe that Plimpton's number, their growth number that's calculated, is wrong. I think that if those numbers are updated, you're going to see Plimpton swing back to like around a 3% increase from a 6% increase, which means that the portion of the assessment will shift from Plimpton back to Halifax and Kingston.
So you think our decrease is actually an error?
It's not an error from the calculation. I think
Yeah, I understand.
I think it's an error from the numbers that the state's using, that they calculated that municipal growth factor. So in version 2 of Silver Lake, they have an increase, overall assessment increase, when you look at the numbers. It's approximately $14,035,488 for a total town assessment, total town's assessment. And last year was $13,149,003. So the difference between that is an $886,444 increase. And I don't believe that that's a sustainable increase. I think a sustainable increase for that number is $327,000. If you take last year's total town number, total town assessments of the $13,149,000 and multiply that by 2.5%, it gives you the $327,000.
Gordon, can I
Yes.
ask a question?
Yes.
Where are you getting your fiscal 15 numbers from? For the assessments?
Off of John's.
Okay, because I double checked these.
Yeah,
Halifax's voted assessment as of town meeting was $4,165,866.
okay, so then there's an error on this, so,
No, this is what town meeting voted, because I had asked John to get the numbers that town meeting actually voted.
okay, so that's good.
So I think all of the fiscal 15 assessments
So
for
they're
the
wrong?
3 towns are all wrong.
Okay. So then, let's look at the numbers off of, so if we go to the other item that's in the packet was Mr. Tuffy's assessment. So like I said, this one is just the one that we're looking at is a worksheet that we created. This is Mr. Tuffy's assessments to the town, so we double check that. And if you look at step 8, that gives us the operating. So so Casey's right, that those are off, those are wrong. So I'm gonna have to run through the worksheet and figure out what's wrong.
We're looking at total assessment.
Yeah, total assessment. So the total assessment is 110,000, 2, 3, 6, and 23 cents.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll rerun. I'll have to go back through our worksheet to figure out what's wrong. And I'm pretty sure it's the regional transportation. Four, 6, 9. 4, 6, 9. Nope, that's right. 7, 6, 5, 6, 7. She's nuts. So it's wrong at the top portion in step 1 someplace. Top number's correct. So that the step 1, the top number is correct. It looks like it's the net school aid number that's incorrect. Seven, 7, 5, 0, 6, 2, 6, 7, 3. 8, 6, 8, 6. Yeah, it's off by right there. All right, so she's wrong. So let's go.
So we should just work out the
Yeah. So we're gonna have to. Well, the minimum contribution numbers are correct on the sheet. They've been updated. So the minimum for 16. So there's if we just step through 16 on this assessment worksheet. Yeah. Let's go back. If everyone goes to the page with a gray spot in the middle. So let's just make sure we have version 2 correct. Version 2 of the Silver Lake budget is currently $23,077,499. Those items have adjustments from the previous budget, which is the handout with the changes. So those two pages should have been together. Does everyone have that? So it's a decrease of $660,915. So the items that affect the overall assessment is when you look at the steps, you take the overall assessment, you remove the transportation, you remove the acquisition of equipment, you remove the replacement of equipment. Okay? That gives you the $22,045,048. The updated assessments for this fiscal year are 34.2% for Halifax, 54.4% for Kingston, and 11.4% for Brooklyn. The total enrollment number is...
I'll get a pen. Oh, you got it? Thank you. Very casual.
The total enrollment is 1,858. Foundation budget is $19,669,150. The required minimum contribution is $12,290,424, and the state aid number is $7,654,666. So briefly, when you look at those numbers, it tells us that the funding above the net required school spending is $2,099,957. So if you step through step one, you start off with $22,045,048. So the updated numbers that we received from the Silver Lake meeting was the insurance reimbursement of $138,000 from Pembroke. Then the estimated CTE tuition was given that night as well as $341,563. Less the estimated CTE tuition receipts is $13,500, and the estimated sped tuition. Am I off here? Yeah, I'm off one. Sorry. What did I read wrong?
CTE was the 341.
See.
Sped is 13.5.
All right. So is everyone following along? I can read here tonight. So the shared cost number is going to be updated as well. That was voted at the Union 31 meeting. Christine, do you know what the updated number is? Or is it tough either? Anyone?
I don't have the exact thing, but it's an increase of... It's an increase in total of $30,504.78.
$30,500.
$4.78.
Okay, so that needs to be changed in the spreadsheet as well. So the state aid numbers. So state aid listed on the cherry sheet are these totals, which $7,654,666. Regional transportation, Mr. Tuffy gave us an updated number at the meeting of $452,300. $306, which is different than when you look at the cherry sheet.
Correct.
Then there's the charter school reimbursement of $67,099. So if you add those totals up, it gives you the $7,721,766. And then the cherry sheet also has charges on it that the state charges us. So those are $14,222 for SPED, school choice sending tuition of $16,700, and charter school sending tuition of $435,420. So the total charges are $466,342. So everyone follow along with that. So the net,
The first set are positives and the second set are negatives.
yes.
And why do the charter numbers not match? Why
Because
is the
one-
amount they reimburse for charter school tuition more than the amount to send people to charter school? Not that we want to complain about that, but
Why do you get less money than it costs you to send somebody to a charter school?
isn't that the opposite way?
No, no. You are getting $67,000 in charter school reimbursement, but you're paying $466,000.
Oh, I read the wrong line. Oh, I was
Correct.
looking at the transportation, which is a bigger number. Oh, my goodness, that's not good.
Well, the way the law works is that somebody has the right to go to a charter school, and you have the obligation to pay for it. So that is what you're paying.
So the total change in state aid, so the total state aid number is $7,707,730. This was the number that John and I talked about after the meeting. And then last year's number, or this fiscal year's number, now this is something that I think we might need to update, because this, looking at this worksheet that we worked up, John, I have this current fiscal year's number incorrect.
Okay.
So I had $7,938,329 for this current fiscal year. For
I don't
total.
have this year's number.
So,
Fiscal year's number.
so this is probably where there's a mistake on the spreadsheet, just so everyone's aware. But at any rate, there is a decrease in overall state aid. Just the number that I'm showing here is incorrect.
And I think the decrease is $52,000. Year over year from cherry sheets.
Charlie, would you be able to bring up this fiscal year's
Which cherry sheet you need?
for Silver Lake? Yeah. Okay, so a new item that's on this year is the net power sharing number. That's a new item to be added to the revenue side for Silver Lake. And that's estimated at $144,000. So that comes off the top. It's just like
Correct.
just like any other number.
Yep.
Okay. So that left us with a net school spending of $13,455,303. So we then have to subtract the minimum net contributions. So Halifax is $3,562,595. Do we have room?
I I don't know.
Okay. Charlie?
Fiscal 15 conference committee number, which is actually the same as everybody else's, $7,617,507.
Say that one more time?
$7,617,507.
Okay, that's the number that I have on this. What do you have for regional
You
transportation?
know, they never updated it for 9C, that's the problem. The regional transport number, still on the local services website, is 622,354. That's incorrect, because that was one of the places that got hit with the 9C. I think we're just under 500,000 for transport.
Okay.
Trying to think where. There was another site, I have to look up the 9C cuts.
Do you have your net minimum contribution
My net minimum contribution.
for this fiscal year?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we have the same.
So the required minimum contribution for fiscal year 16 is $12,290,424?
Yep.
Okay.
And then I have Halifax listed at $3,562,595.
Correct.
I have Kingston listed at $7,019,243.
Correct.
And Plimpton at $1,708,586.
I agree.
Okay. So, before you guys got here, I had mentioned that I double-checked the municipal growth factor number for all three towns. And when I looked at Plimpton's, I'm very concerned about the number that they've calculated. I'm asking somebody at DOR to double-check. Because if that number changes, that growth number changes, it's going to affect the minimum net contributions. Now, the question I have that you possibly don't have the answer to, but I'd like to ask it. If the number is, if there's some number that's calculated incorrectly, say it's that growth factor number, would you expect to see that the minimum net contribution number, if it's calculated incorrectly for Plimpton, would you expect to see the minimum net contribution number stay the same and the portions change? Or would you think the total would change if Plimpton's number is incorrect?
I would think the minimum contribution number would stay the same, however, it would get divvied up in a different proportion among member communities. You may remember 2 years ago, we had a similar situation where there was a change in, there was a policy change implicit in the number that the Governor then Patrick used for local aid. That changed the minimum contribution number by town in the end, but it didn't change the overall minimum contribution number.
Okay.
Because that's a function of foundation budgets more than it is of individual towns.
Okay.
The growth number deals with your ability to pay, not the required amount to be paid.
Okay.
That's my belief.
Okay. So if you subtract from the net school spending the total minimum contribution, I've got a number of $1,164,879. I believe that should be the same as what you have calculated. Yes, thereabouts.
To be honest with you, I feel like I came to this movie late, so I haven't quite figured out what's going on.
We're just walking through the assessment
Okay.
calculation.
Do your end assessments match my end assessments?
So they were off by a few $1,000s.
Okay.
So I guess, I mean, we don't have to go through this whole thing, but basically the next step is you subtract the net spending from that point. You've got approximately $164,000 left. That assessment is multiplied out by the town's percentage for the enrollment. We get a number there in step 4. You take the regional transportation, the same thing, you take the total transportation minus the state aid, leaves us with $551,997. You multiply that out by the town's percentages, you receive a number there. Then we have the acquisition and replacement costs, totaled up to $28,148. Multiply that out. And then there's the debt service number, which is multiplied out. So for the totals for Halifax, this worksheet calculates to $4,158,394. So the decrease is incorrect because my numbers for the last year are wrong. But the overall increase is 110. So the overall assessment, do you have that number there, John?
I do. I show, so the two numbers that I think we're talking about is the increase, the total increase of the operating assessment, or the total operating assessment is $4,164,071.85. And the exempt capital, which is the debt service on the middle school and the high school, is $529,727.22.
Can you read the operating one again?
4164 071 spot 85. Keep going down the pennies.
Are you talking about 16 or 15?
16.
Okay.
You want 15?
No, I was just.
15 is 4,165,866.09.
Correct.
And that's what I have wrong on this spreadsheet.
So the difference between those two numbers is an overall decrease of $1,794.24 in the operating assessment based on this proposed budget. And if you're looking at the exempt capital goes from, in 15, $550,881.52 down to $529,727.22. I think I've computed it, and that's a decrease of $22,948.54, or 0.5%, 0.5%.
Okay. What do you have for a total overall increase on the assessment?
I gave you the wrong number, so let's go back. I gave you the overall decrease between operating and debt service. The decrease for the debt service should have been $21,154.30, which is a decrease of 3.8%. Does that make more sense? And you are indeed the math teacher.
Yeah, looks good.
All right.
So this portion's correct?
Yep.
So I've got something wrong in the other portion then, for 15.
Yeah. And I think the difference between your 16 operating assessment and mine is I used a slightly different number for transportation, and that came from a correction that was sent out by Department of Education or Department of Elementary and Secondary Education 2 days after the governor's budget was released. That Friday afternoon, I realized it was a mistake.
So what do you have for an overall increase operating side?
$22,948. 22,000.
No, total, the total towns. When you look at
All of them together?
all towns, last year versus this year, or this year versus last year.
We didn't add it up that way. I just did it like that.
You have 14,049,128
120 for the total assessments for the towns this year.
for the total assessment.
The 60.
So if you look at 16, no, you're talking about this number. So this number here. So they have 14,049,128.23, which is an increase.
But we have to know for sure what the
Yeah, 15 numbers right there. 15
13
numbers.
million,
110,000.
236.22.
So I have a number. We'll
Okay.
see. I wonder how many different answers we have.
You get a lot when you run it through a
We'll see,
spreadsheet and
yeah.
everyone changes some typo. 28, 23 minus 13, 110, 246. So I have an increase of last year. So this year's draft 2 budget versus last year's assessment is a total overall increase of $938,892.
I agree.
And one penny.
And actually, I stopped doing that.
Oh,
We're talking 938.
938,000. So divide that by 13, 110, 236. So it's a 7.1% increase overall for the operating budget.
Now, 7.1% increase in the operating assessment.
Operating assessment, yes, operating assessment. So financially, I don't think that type of increase is going to be sustainable. A 7% increase in the assessment.
Can I ask a
Yes.
question? Because I took some time over the weekend, and the average increase since 2010 in minimum contributions is 3.12% per year. Okay, and that's just in minimum contributions. That doesn't even count in transportation or anything.
Yeah.
All right. If it's what the town is looking for is no more than a 2.5% increase in overall assessments.
Yeah.
We are going to get to a point where it's not even going to come down to what we can afford anymore. We're going to be at net school spending minimum contribution and whatever the state says is going to go. We're not going to have any say in budgets. Okay, and that's where I'm kind of trying to see where the town is, because if you're going to talk about overall increases in assessments, part of that is the minimum contribution number that we have no control over. So if you're looking for a foundation budget net school spending minimum contribution, you need to let us know, and it's going to take some time to get there because we're going to have to revamp the whole program. I mean, we're talking about massive cuts.
I don't think.
And then that's, I guess, then that's where we need to have this conversation with all of us.
Okay.
I mean, we are talking about a totally different program. We're talking about whether we still want to have a vocational program at the high school. If you're talking about 2.5% increases in overall assessment numbers, and then we get to a point where it's not even a conversation anymore. It's going to be driven by net school spending, minimum contribution.
So I guess the problem long-term that we have for the town is we can only increase 2.5%.
And I understand that.
And we have approximately 125,000 new growth. Approximately, right, year over year, that's what we have approximately. So this year's 350, if you take, with that spreadsheet. If you look at our revenue numbers on the other spreadsheet that Charlie handed out,
Gordon, just one thing, I mean, at the end of the day, I got in a note from Karen, there were probably about 168,000 for new growth.
168?
Yeah,
What's up, good?
You got that today, Charlie?
yeah.
Well, that changes.
Yeah, that changes.
Well, also, Sandy wasn't here, she was at school, so this is the last hour.
No, it's really good news.
Yeah.
So did she say what the big change was?
No, just, you know, as they go through all the building permits and continue to update and go out there and do the assessments, that's what they're coming up with.
Okay, so,
Make sure that they give them a have her take.
so that's 34,000. 168 and 134. Right. So this year, we're at 346,000 for new growth, for 2.5%. So I guess maybe we should estimate 140,000 for new growth. 350 plus 1. It's 490.
While you're calculating that, Gordon, can I just ask something?
Yeah.
Just because I know we're going through a lot of numbers, and I'm normally a numbers girl. But I just think we need to have conversations too about
Okay.
sort of what Casey just brought up. Like, I understand where you're going with the 2.5% could get to minimum contribution, and we talked about this at length, I think, at Thursday school committee. Meaning that I can speak for myself, that I certainly don't want to be on the bus to minimum contribution. But what Gordon, I think, is saying is 7.1%. And again, I haven't made this decision emotionally yet. I haven't really looked at the numbers. But if he's saying 7% is too high, is there a way that we can come to what's acceptable based on what he's saying with, 2.5%? You're saying that's not going to be enough, but we need to come to something that can be sustainable.
And that's what I'm asking right now for myself. I haven't talked about it with the rest of the committee. And it's what I tried to bring up the other night is if overall assessments can only go up by 2.5% every year, we are going to be at net school spending within a few years. It's not even going to take us that long to get there. Talking with the superintendent today, to get to a 2.5% increase for this year, it's an additional $611,000 cut to what we've already cut. Okay?
But to that point, last year we used one-time money to subsidize, and that was the thing.
But that was capital.
But it's in the operating budget now.
No,
You know-
we moved all the.
No, I mean it's in the operating budget now. The increase is there. Because last year's budget, when you look at the total spend, included that capital spend, but the revenue side was not in the assessments.
Right.
So that increase, we didn't increase overall spending by 335,000,
No, we did.
right? because that number was already there. So on top of using that one-time money last year, we're talking about increasing 600 and the number that you just said.
No. What the version of the budget that we submitted last Thursday,
Yep.
is a 500 and, all right, now I have to find my budget. $563,379 increase over last year.
But what I'm saying is, the assessment last year didn't include the 335,000.
No, it did not.
So the towns have to make up that portion.
We're not spending it this year.
Yes, you are.
No, we're not.
Charlie?
The assessment and the budget are, obviously, everybody knows, aren't the same thing. Before the meeting on Thursday, I had run numbers and I had sent them to John. Obviously, John was able to update them in between. But one of the things that someone had asked me was, wait a minute, the budget's up only $1.1 million. But the assessments at that time were up $1.6 million. So there were three things that were happening. One is the budget itself was up 1.1. You had lower state aid by over $100,000. I think it was like $130,000 cut in state aid. But three was that the raw number of the budget, capital and operating combined, included $335,000 that had a revenue source. That revenue source has disappeared. The only other place to get that revenue source is the assessment, which is why the assessments were $500,000 at that time greater than the increase in the budget. That's what Gordon's pointing out. We're not saying there's $335,000 of capital expenses, but there's $335,000 of expenses that are there, that are being assessed to the three towns at that time. I'm not going to quote numbers as of today, but that's how things were a week ago.
And I guess the only thing I'd add to that is just to be clear, when you look at what the money was used for last year, there was a specific list of items that were purchased with that money. They were all items that are not recurring on an annual basis, that have a long life and are individually expensive. So I guess I'd call them all capital items, or maybe a few of you might call capital light, because depending on which town I'm in, it defines what the definition of capital item is. But they were not items that would reoccur year after year after year.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that capital, whatever the spending was last year, it's that spending plus more this year, and the towns need to make up that 335,000.
John, do you know what the increase in insurance was last
I
year?
don't think so, because I think the budget is only up what the assessment was, not what it didn't include that capital, did it?
The assessments did not, no.
But what I'm saying is now the towns have to make up that money.
They don't, because it's not a repetitive purchase.
Charlie?
Last year
There was
0%.
$335,000 of capital expenses that were funded by a capital budget. The source, they had money set aside in a capital budget account for that purpose. The thing is that if you take the raw budget numbers include $335,000, this is a week ago, $335,000 of additional operating expenses that are being assessed to the three towns at that time. Again, we've gone through 22 different changes of the numbers tonight, so I'm saying those numbers were true a week ago. I'm not saying they are now, but the point is that there is a source of money that is no longer there, even if it's the direct expense wasn't there either to balance it off, but we're now being asked for that additional amount of money to fund operating expenses. That's why the increase in the assessments are a different number than the increase in the budget.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a question of the school committee. Do you see any action, Ken, do you see any action at the state level into trying to get the legislature to recognize more of their responsibility to support schools, since, the state Constitution specifically places responsibility for the schools under the legislature, not under the towns, and yet they constantly make all these decisions that they delegate to us, but they don't really delegate us enough money. Halifax, it's elementary school, only gets 50% of the chapter 70. So it seems as though since we're limited, we can't go any higher than 2.5 unless we have an override. And I haven't seen any appetite for anyone doing an override, whether it's the secondary school or the elementary school. So I don't know where we go from here unless we start going in another direction, trying to get the legislature to play their role, which they should be playing. I don't know, you can't expect us to come up with a 7% increase when we can only have a 2.5% increase without wiping out our police department and our fire department and our library. I mean, it's just it's facing the same brick wall that you people are facing. And I don't know what the answer is.
Right, I think we all need to sort of talk about that because there hasn't been a lot of movement. Like, I think that Charlie Baker has talked a lot about unfunded mandates, and they put a task force together to try to look at those kinds of things. So are we hopeful? Sure, we're hopeful, but again, the money has to come from somewhere in the state to trickle down, and they are facing their own financial constraints. And so, you know,
they have a lot more authority than the town does.
Right.
Because they're not under a 2.5% limit, which they put us under.
Right, and certainly we all know in this room that we wouldn't be in this particular position if we didn't have an increase in sped, and so we're trying to navigate the best that we can. And I think the most important thing that we're talking about when it comes to numbers is the second page, which just sort of showed what the deficit was. And so now we just got some really great news about new growth, so that certainly helps that $96,000 go down. But the bottom line is, like, we as you know, we've gone through budgets over the years, and we're at minimum servicing for public safety, and we're not going to find big numbers, and it wouldn't be right for us to ask the schools to balance our budget. So that's not really the spirit of which we have this discussion. But I think it's just to say we all recognize that education is important, and we all recognize that you have started initiatives in technology, which I understand we need to start on that road. But there's got to be something that gives, or we need to grow in a smaller level when it comes to the budget. So as Peg said, 7%. We could all look at our assessment that you calculated, and it's a $1,100, $1,700 savings, and just be like, great, awesome, let's just take that. But I think that the Finance Committee needs to look beyond just balancing this year and beyond this part. And I think that gets into the whole conversation later on in the week about the technology and the constant need to update that came up on Thursday. And I'm not against technology, I'm just trying to be real with, once you go down that road, you can't really turn back. And so what's the commitment? Does it change? Do class sizes have to change in order to accommodate it? Like, if you bring technology, is that helping the teachers? That, I don't know. But that's part of the conversation to say, I'm personally thrilled that, our assessment based on Thursday is down a little bit. But we need to look beyond just this year, and we need to do that for our town.
And I understand that, but by law, Silver Lake needs to vote a budget by March 31st.
Right.
So I need, and I think the other committee members from Halifax would agree with me, that we need some kind of direction where you guys want us to go.
So, from the perspective looking at the budget overall, I think the total town assessments need to grow someplace in the 2.5% range to be affordable, because next year, if the minimum net contribution number changes, or this year if it changes, I think growing at that rate is what the towns need from all departments, because there's no way we can support a 7% growth this year and then see a 7% growth next year when the calculation changes and it hits us.
And when Gordon talks about that minimum contribution and his fear about it changing, it happened about 2 years ago with Kingston and Plimpton, where I think it was Plimpton was underassessed by 100 and Kingston was overassessed. So at the end of the day, they had to make that up. And so I think Gordon's concern by looking at the minimum contribution is that Plimpton's could be wrong, which means that after town meeting, we could conceivably find out that we owe another one of those towns money for the assessment. So just in case anybody in the room didn't understand why he's so concerned.
Okay.
Yeah, if we thought there was a way that the state would start stepping up to the plate and doing their job, I would be willing to take a chance for 1 year and suggesting to you to go into some of your reserves to fund your budget, to lower the assessment without lowering the budget. But you can't do it this year without having a repetitive thing in years in the future, unless there's some other solution. So I'm not willing to suggest that, but I don't know what the solution would be.
So on that point, Peg, that's that last year, when the technology portion got funded out of that one-time money,
Right.
it's almost like that one-time money has to carry out now.
Yes.
But that's, I mean, that's not a good budgeting practice.
No, it's not. I said if it was a short-term thing, because we knew there would be a long-term solution coming down from the state, I would be willing to do it, but I'm not willing to do it and throw all future budgets askew.
Is there a number that you can come to a compromise?
This budget is a number of increases and a few decreases. I do think that we've become fixated on the $355,000. And I say that because if you look at, that was a revenue source that we used, which was free cash, one-time revenue. You do that at your town meeting, you fund something.
But we don't
Just
net-
finish.
Okay.
And it was used to offset the expense of some items in the budget. If those don't recur in the next year, then that isn't the source of increase that we see year over year. This is Hanson mentioned insurance. We, like you, last year did not have an increase in insurance because we're Mayflower Municipal Health. That had a 0% increase for 2 years in a row. This year we have an increase. It's going to be, I don't know what the number is, 100 and some odd $1,000. That's an increase that we have to accommodate in the 16 budget. We didn't have to accommodate in the 15 budget. Yes, we can go through the budget and look for those sources of increases. And your point about what is the budget growth, what's budget creep, what's it going to mean, is a good one. I don't think the solution is, I don't think the problem comes from using one-time money for non-recurring expenses. It comes from the nature of what we do. There's an increase in the cost of schools.
So I guess the overall concern is when we talk about this budget, is this year's number for Halifax acceptable? And is this budget with next year's growth acceptable? And I don't know if the answer to the second question is yes.
How about if we go back to basics? Charlie had sent an email out a few weeks ago just saying, please don't grow your business. Please look at your expenses. If there's something that you need to fund, steps, lanes, insurance, pension, whatever it is, within your line item, if you lost a grant. For instance, you guys lost the grant on the elementary side. Like, those are the things to fund. And anything new, don't put in the budget until we see what that number is. And maybe that's the starting spot. Like, maybe that's what we've asked every department to do that, and maybe that's what the schools need to do, and then...
I think that's what we did.
So the only thing in your budget right now are steps, lanes, so this is already done. There's
There's no new people, there's no new positions, there's nothing of that in here.
Okay.
We cut all of that out.
Okay.
Charlie?
Does it include a pay increase for fiscal 16?
Negotiated raise.
No, I understand it's negotiated, but we're not, but the thing is, right now, all the town budgets don't include any money for that. We're going to, if we're going to include something for that, union and non-union, we're going to cut back someplace else. We didn't make that decision in Silver Lake, you did. And I know you did it with the best of intentions, but if we don't have the money to fund our own pay increases here, asking us to fund the pay increases there is a very difficult proposition.
Great. So to Charlie's point, there is, in that deficit number that we're talking about, there is no across-the-board increase, just so that's out there to everyone.
But there are 2 other towns that have voted in their own
Exactly.
communities, those things. I'm just
I-
bringing it up,
And
because I'm
that's
a
the problem.
representative, and that's what.
I just think Charlie's making the point that
And I
there's a
totally
difference.
understand where you're coming from. I do. So,
Charlie?
And the other thing is, I don't know whether the lanes themselves changed in that, and I don't have the negotiated contract that got approved a couple of months ago by both sides versus the previous contract. I don't know if there are more steps, I don't know if there are more lanes, I don't know if the distances between the steps changed or anything. I'm not saying they did, I just don't know. Because when we saw this happen several years ago with the Halifax Elementary School budget, we saw additional steps being added or additional lanes being added, and the jumps between steps for those top lanes, or whatever you want to call them, were significantly more than they were at the bottom. Again, for good or ill, that's how it is, but when we're making decisions like that, the question is going to be is, can we sustain those decisions? If we're going to give pay increases to people and then run into the brick wall that we're running into, you really got 3 solutions: override, cut somebody else's budget, cut your own budget. That's what, or a combination of the 3. That's what you're stuck with.
So this budget represents the memo that came from Charlie.
except this includes contracted increases.
Okay.
So does the elementary school budget have the same?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the difference, so there's a difference that we need to be aware of, that the town employees are not, there's no wage increase across the board, where there is a wage increase across the board for the 2 schools. So we need to just be aware that we're treating them differently. Just aware of it. I'm not saying it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, just, yes, Peg.
I'd like to say that's a bad thing. I don't think it's fair to treat a small group of your lower paid employees with no increase when you have 2 groups of people who tend to get higher salaries to begin with, an increase. I don't think that's fair. I really don't think it's fair at all. And I would vote against federal funding the employees' salaries, now that I know what I know about the schools increasing.
Okay, well then, what's everyone else's feeling on that? Anyone?
I think Silver Lake is differently. I mean, I was a representative of 3 towns, so when I made my vote, I represent 3 towns. I don't represent Halifax. If it was just Halifax, I certainly would have made a different decision. But I think Silver Lake is voted by 2 towns too. So I don't know.
It's beside the point. It's
No, I
a
understand
fact.
that, Peg, but it's a point. It's a
You know,
point.
it's a fact.
It is a fact. I mean, believe me, I will not feel totally comfortable if, our employees on this side of the street don't get increases.
Yeah.
I get exactly what you're saying, but
So,
I certainly don't want to, penalize.
And you keep complaining about our losing police officers and our
No, I
losing
understand.
firemen to other towns because our wage scale is not as high as the other towns. We're always losing firemen to Middleborough and police officers, and police officers to Middleborough and firemen to Kingston, because their salary schedules are so much higher than us. And it becomes terrible to become the training ground for all other towns because you can't afford to give an increase.
Yeah.
So the question is, should our budget reflect an increase? And then be talking about what that deficit is. Well, it's a valid question. If
But then what you'll end up doing, I'm just going to point it out for you, and I know you know the math. Like right now, we're probably in a $30,000 deficit. But if circuit breaker money changes, if you change the budgeting of circuit breaker money from 50 to 65%, is it 66%? 66,000? Oh,
That's what we estimated that change.
okay, it is. Okay. So then that sort of helps with our deficit again. But I know.
but to Peg's point,
No, I understand.
is that what we should be doing? If 55% of the, I'm,
Well, I think, to be perfectly honest, Mr. Chairman, I think we should stop talking about the deficit and start talking about all of the budgets and the merit of the budgets themselves. See if we can start making some changes within budgets, make decisions about the two schools, because it seems as though all we're doing is talking about a deficit that keeps changing. Let's just forget the deficit and start talking about the merit of the budgets that have been submitted and try to vote for reasonable budgets, and then decide whether or not we should be treating all our employees the same, or whether we should expect a certain group of employees to pick up the slack.
I mean, I think we need to treat everybody the same, I mean, no question at all.
Can I just say one thing? I just would like to say that from the elementary school perspective, that I don't want to speak for everybody, that when we were negotiating the teachers' contracts and we were talking about this whole situation with the budget, we took all of these things into consideration. And we understand the sentiment in the town is what it is. And I just want it to be floated out there that that was all discussed, and it was a brutal process, and it took a long time to get to where we ended up, and I just don't want people thinking that it was,
Let's call a point of order, sir.
yeah.
Contract negotiations are currently in executive session still because we have not yet voted upon this contract, even though it has been ratified by the Halifax Teachers Association. So it's my belief, and I have confirmed this with the State Ethics Commission, that this could be construed as a violation of open meeting law to have this discussion until our committee has had the opportunity to vote as a whole on what the negotiating committee agreed to with the Halifax Teachers Association.
Okay. Peg?
You know, I speak from someone who sat on your side of the table and negotiated those contracts for 15 years, so I know how hard it is. But now I sit on this side of the table, and I have to look at the town as a whole. Back when I was there, I thought about the schools, and I looked at the contracts and decided what I thought was right. Now I have to think about the whole town, and I don't think it's fair for the town to treat a smaller group of its employees different from two other groups just because this is the group we can control. This is the group that we can hit. We can't touch those, but we can touch these. And I don't think that's fair. I didn't think it was fair when I was on the school committee either, but I couldn't do anything about it. I just don't think it's fair.
Okay. Laura's got her hand up.
Hi, I have a question about what can be thought about funding differently within the budget. So teacher contracts are what they are. The school committees have line item autonomy, excuse me. So even if town meeting doesn't vote to fund their full budget, they can make changes to particular portions as they see fit. Has there been any discussion, and I know this was brought up Thursday at the last Silver Lake School Committee meeting, but has there been any discussion among the committee about looking at things that are huge line item figures such as sports and extracurricular activities within the school, and asking participants to pay a larger contribution for those activities because they bear a heavier burden in terms of maintenance? Has there been any discussion among the committee?
At the Silver Lake level?
Yep.
That would have to go to, I think Building and Grounds still does fees. And they have a meeting scheduled for April 15th.
So that meeting would happen after you need to vote on your budget?
Yes. We need to go to budget by March 30th.
Is the suggestion a realistic one to ask the participants of those programs to bear a larger contribution in supporting them to help defray the cost for other taxpayers? And I ask this as a general question to anyone in the room that cares to answer.
Peg?
My opinion on that is it's either contributes to the student's education and should be funded by the town, or it doesn't contribute and you shouldn't have it. I mean, this business, when I went to school and my kids went to school, they didn't pay for transportation and they didn't pay for sports and they didn't pay for extracurricular activities. It's either good for the kids because it's part of their education, or it's not. And if it's not, it shouldn't be used for such people. That's how I feel about it.
Anybody else want to respond to Lori's? Kim?
I know a few years ago, I don't remember how many years ago, it was looked at before, and it had been tossed around like perhaps like certain sports cost more than others. So ice hockey costs more. I know you adopted a girls hockey team, and that's going to be more ice time. But so they looked at perhaps maybe charging hockey students more or football students more. But what they ended up doing is just raising the fee to $200 because other communities charge per sports. But at that time, I think they added $50 to it or something.
We had, I think it was a $50 increase.
Yeah.
And very quickly, in terms of the, can I turn around?
Yeah, I don't care.
Good stand up.
Thank you. This thing feels better, actually. Thank you. So, at Silver Lake, we have two fees. One is an all-inclusive fee for any extracurricular activity or sport that you choose to play, and one is a much reduced fee if all you want to do is drama. And a few years ago, we had a discussion about changing that fee structure. We have a fee structure that one fee covers every sport you want to participate in. However, there is no cap, there's no limit on what a family can pay. We looked at other school systems where they have a per sport fee, but they at some point put in a cap per family. At the time we looked at it, we were frankly at about where we thought we could be compared to other districts. We just collected in a different way. And before I go any further, I just want to say thanks to the generosity of booster clubs in particular, there is no child who doesn't get to play sports or participate in extracurricular activities for money reasons. One of the things that happened, and we talked about having Pembroke having left the district a number of years ago, there were about 45% of our student body. We have the same number of teams that we had then. We have the same number of participants we had then. It's just that we're now reaching down further into the student pool, and more people get an opportunity to play and participate, and I think that's wonderful. I think that's a great thing. In terms of charging for individual sports, we sort of look at charging for individual sports. We have sort of an odd system, but I think it's what happens in most schools. Ice hockey has a very, I say very, active sports booster group. They help subsidize that program in sort of a way that isn't readily apparent. Football is an expensive sport. It's frankly the sport that in many ways produces more revenue than any other sport because we have night games, we have Thanksgiving, we have some of those things that we don't have in other cases. We can look at it, and frankly, I don't think it would be a bad idea to look at it, but I think it's going to be a marginal increase. I don't think it's going to be a game changer. And finally, the only other thing I want to say is that you mentioned girls hockey, and we do have a girls hockey team. We co-opted with Whitman Hanson this past year. What we did with the girls hockey team is what we've done with every other new sport, certainly in the 14 years I've been in the district, and that is it needs to be self-funded for 3 years before they can even approach the school committee and ask them to fund it. So at this point in time, we have a girls hockey team. It's a Silver Lake team. It's an MIAA team. However, it's being paid for by the participants through fundraising. The arrangement was that they have to raise the money in advance, have it on deposit with us, and we pay it. After 3 years, they can approach the school committee and see if the school committee will adopt them, if you will, and make it part of the budget.
And that normally happens, right, John? I don't remember a sport that you haven't adopted.
You know, I'm trying to think. Lacrosse, boys and girls lacrosse, and boys and girls swimming, and actually swimming is a co-ed sport, are the only sports I can remember adding.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of sports that because of enrollments, we have come close to dropping and have found out that other schools had the same problem. And we have co-op teams. So we have at different times co-op teams with swimming, co-op teams with gymnastics, co-op teams with wrestling. And by the co-op, I mean we join with another town and share the expense and keep the sport going. Those are the only ones I can remember.
Yeah.
So lacrosse is the only team, the lacrosse and swimming are the only ones I remember adding in the last many years.
Yeah, 8 years. Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it's not the answer I was hoping for, but I do.
We've had this discussion internally a few times. it's not a huge pot of gold that I think we can crack. We certainly can make the decision that we will have less sports and it will cost us less money. And whether we do that by either eliminating sports or raising fees to a point where we have less participation, to Mrs. Fitzgerald's point, is that what we want to do? Is that frankly sort of part of the program? And you know, I'm going to suggest to you that we have kids who come to school because they get to play sports. We have kids who come to school because that peer group of theirs that they want to hang out with is involved in music or drama, and that keeps them coming back and going to school. Those are all important things to have happen, and I hope that we can continue to have an after-school program, whether it's sports, drama, and clubs, which is what we have now, or some variant of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for getting a chance to stand up. It feels good.
You can lay down if you need to.
Was he laying down?
I heard his voice. I rarely see it.
We're going to be here for a few minutes. Can you guys discuss the plan for the capital spend for Silver Lake for this year? Because that's not currently in the budget that shows the assessment.
There's a meeting on Friday.
Well, I gave the handout, this 7-page handout, just maybe you guys could just briefly discuss it.
Is it just horizontal?
It's this, capital plan for long-term.
If people don't have copies of that, I seem to have a few in back here.
It should be the big package that Kendra photocopied.
Yeah, it's in the first page.
Yeah.
First page, 6 o'clock. This package. First page. I feel like you know. Missing the dress.
Woody?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
There's 2 pages of this.
So before you, it's marked draft. So this represents some work that has been talked about for a while. Starting last, and really after last fiscal year. The school committee started to meet, or the building and ground subcommittee started to meet to talk about what are the long-term capital needs that the district has. We had talked about it at a couple of school committee meetings as well. My recollection is September, October, November, and December. And it started out dealing with just the physical plan, buildings, grounds, safety, security, those kinds of items. We had always talked about incorporating technology into it as well. We had an existing 5-year technology plan. It was updated on a regular basis. So just recently we merged, if you will, part of the technology plan that we had into what was identified as some, you okay?
Okay.
All right. Some long-term capital needs that we have. This plan hasn't been formally adopted yet. It's still a work in progress. We've stretched it out to 4 years at this point in time. There's a meeting, as was talked about on Friday, to talk about both the costs associated with it and what the plan should look like. I think it's a work in progress. The goal here is to be able to have something to present to the towns in the not too distant future. Certainly the whole, it's wonderful to talk about the needs that we have, but without a funding source, this isn't a plan, it's an illusion. We need to make it a real plan. And if that's going to involve a conversation that goes with the member communities about a funding source to take care of these items. Now, as you go through it, it's Heinz 57 of needs that we have. It is computer switches that were included a decade ago, it's now coming to the end of their useful life, and other things like the track that we have that cost 7 figures to build the very first time, and will require some maintenance, some expensive maintenance, about every 10 years to keep it in good shape, and everything in between. Does that help? Can I get a name in? Thank you.
I have a question, just, excuse me, because I'm probably very naive in this. When we get these numbers here for like repairs and tracks and, I want to say, things that we can get multiple quotes for, do we, or do we have a set individual that we have to?
Yes, we have to get quotes for them. They're covered by Chapter 30B, which is the counties. And so for something like this, it would be either the construction bid laws or the Uniform Procurement Act that we have to follow. So yes, we get multiple bids.
Are we choosing the lowest one, or are we compromising?
The requirement is, and these are just allowance numbers. These are not. These are an order of magnitude. This is what we'd expect. It's a good educated guess as to what these items cost. In fact, as you look at it, some of these items will change as time goes on, because we're predicting what it's going to cost 4 years from now. And we're not very good at predicting what it's going to cost 4 years from now. But the requirement is the lowest responsive and responsive to bidder. And so that's what we do.
Have you talked to vendors, John, or is it just your guess for some of these expenses?
We will talk to vendors.
Okay.
And say, so what's this going to cost?
So that's reflected in
That's
these
reflected in
prices.
it. The other thing that we get to do, that you get to do as well, and that is we can talk to, we don't have competitors, we can talk to other school systems and say, so you've done a project like this. One, if you had a wonderful bid spec that you used, can you share it with us? And the other is to say, well, what did it cost? And it's a non-competitive situation. So, sure, we're very free with that information. We get to do that. The private sector doesn't get to do that.
And the only thing, I know there's going to be a discussion on Friday about all these items. And, you know, certainly there has been an influx of revenue from the Pembroke settlement. But even if the Pembroke settlement is used to purchase these items in the next 2 years, again, there's got to be a mechanism that we, you know, like for instance, the computer things or the track, like we know that the track every 10 years needs to be done. And so certainly after it's done, we need to start preparing that $10,000 a year to go toward the repairing of the track, which will increase the overall assessment of the town. So when we talk about these projects, we have to look at the big picture and not, again, just this year. Again, we don't want to have our education be affected by it, but there's only so much money that we have to spend, and we can't keep going back to the taxpayers. And I just want to remind everybody that we are spending the entire levy to get to the deficit that we're at now. So that's just something to keep in mind when we talk about that 2.5% may not be something that's achievable based on knowing these kinds of things too. But that's.
And to be a little more specific to your question, if you look at the first 3 items on that list, additional indoor and outdoor cameras, a 2-way radio system, and a new middle school keyless entry system. So the first 2 items actually come off the state list. There are multiple vendors who do that, but that comes off the state list, so we know exactly what that's going to be. The last item that you see, the keyless entry system, is in talking to a couple of vendors and say, this is what we're interested in, what would it cost? But it's not a bid list item.
But some of those items, you know, we look at our capital plan need to be prioritized in our own capital plan, to say, because it's our taxpayers that are going to actually vote on it.
Okay.
You know, in looking at the list, I can understand where it's coming from. But when I look at this list, I compare it with Halifax's needs. And, you know, a bookkeeping system is what, 18 years old? A bookkeeping system is 30 years old? Charlie's been complaining
No,
about
it's-
it. He's complaining
No,
about
the bookkeeping,
No, he's been complaining about the technology, which is so bad in this town. The town accountant sees things that have to be done. We just can't afford them. And I'm not really sure these are all really needs, or if it's kind of like a wish list too, just because there's some money available. If the money weren't available, I don't think this list would be important at all. Because, you know what I feel about the money.
Well, we've sort of worked our way through this, and it was certainly at the behest of the towns that we come up with a long and comprehensive list of all the current future and projected needs that we have. That's what you have.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I'd like to think that you want to pull out your checkbook and say, fine, you can do all of these with real funding. I'm not sure it's going to necessarily work out exactly like that. But in all seriousness, these are not wants, these are needs. How high a need it is and where it fits into your priorities and Kingston's priorities and Clinton's priorities is yet to be determined. These are all needs. I'll be glad to have the conversation with you, and if you'd like to do an inspection of why we say the track needs to resurface, or why there are issues with the tennis courts, or if you'd like to talk to our people about the shortcomings of the accounting system, we'd love to engage in this conversation. That would be fine.
Summer had a hand up, then Lori.
I was just going to sort of echo what Peg was saying a little bit, is I think that with some of these things, we really need to take a hard look at what is a necessity and what really truly affects our children's ability to learn and access to a quality education. And I understand that in certain things are a concern, whether it be safety or, you know, upkeep of the grounds and the buildings and things like that. But I just think we need to really take a hard look at what we would like and what we really absolutely need. And sometimes it's hard to draw that line, but I don't know. That's all I'm gonna say without ruffling too many feathers.
Laura.
So, as someone who attended the special town meeting and has sat in on a variety of school committee meetings, as I look at this list, it looks very familiar. It looks pretty like a lot of cut and pasting from the article that went in front of the special town meeting, and a combination of the technology plan that was presented in February to the Salt Lake Regional School District School Committee. So what I don't, there's one item in particular that I'm not fully understanding why it's on here twice, it seems, and for a higher value than I think was presented at special town meeting, and that is related to the storage sheds. So I see in year one, there's a $60,000 expense, and then again, I see a $40,000 expense and an $18,000 expense, and I could be wrong, but those seem duplicative. So could, as a first question to the committee that put this together, can you explain the difference between those two projects? Because it feels like it's larger than what we were asked to initially vote on at town meeting.
Hopefully my voice will hold up.
All right.
The storage shed cost $50,000. It's $10,000 for the site work. We're doing the site work for both sheds when we do it, so it saves money in the end.
Okay.
So the second shed is in year 2.
Okay, but for the special town meeting, we were asked to spend, I think it was $68,000. I don't have it in front of me, but I know it wasn't 60 plus 40 plus 18.
We spread it out over 2 years. In one shed a year. Yeah.
Okay.
The storage shed was $60,000, and the middle school storage shed was $18,000. I think you're combining it.
Okay.
The $18,000 is the middle school. I have that if you'd like to see what we presented there.
Okay. I think I would just echo Summer's comments. Again, I think a lot of these things are probably warranted, but I don't know that if I, as a parent who has a child in the elementary school and a child going into the middle school, think about needs and nice to haves, some of these things feel like nice to haves in comparison to a $300,000 expense that we need to replace the roof on the elementary school that's down the line. So I'm not on the board, not elected to anything, not running for anything. I'm just a resident, taxpayer, and parent. And I don't feel comfortable with all these expenses. I feel like they should be prioritized a little differently, because in terms of what's going to provide a quality education for all the children who attend schools in Halifax, I'm more concerned about the roof on the elementary than the fields and the sheds.
If I may, the only thing to say was, as John said and basically Kim has said, we were asked to build a capital plan, and that's what we did. And as part of the conversation, Kim had mentioned the town has a capital plan, and you can't always fund everything in your capital plan, but if you don't list it, if you don't have a conversation, it can't come up. So we're not saying our expectation is to be able to get this, but these are needs of the school. Friday, hopefully we can have a conversation, excuse me, and talk about what everyone can agree are the priorities. But these are things that have been talked about over the years. Some of them, we've talked about before, and we have to keep cutting them. You're absolutely right. If we do the track this year, 10 years from now, it's going to have to happen again. But we can't build out that far. Well, prices change.
Yeah, because I noticed also in here about on the last year, you're going to need the technology edge switches again. So I think that's important when we talk about, like, I wanted a little longer capital plan. I know I was being a little aggressive because we have a much longer one, because it's just easier for us to plan things out. And so I know you're aware that this is, it isn't always going to be funded this way, because we find in our own, 2 years ago, I know I'm so sick of saying it, 2 years ago we were supposed to buy a fire engine, and we didn't. So, but if you look at the switches, like if it's happening every 3 or 4 years, does that become an operating expense? I don't know, but I expect to have that conversation on Friday.
You know, I have to apologize because when I spoke that, criticizing Liz, I didn't realize it was in response to a question made from this side of the table. I really thought it was something that people within the school system had presented to you because they knew this money was there. And I think it's always a big temptation to tie it up so you don't have to give it back. But, so I do apologize.
Summer?
Kind of a two-part thing. One simple thing is, I know that the Halifax Elementary School Committee in the past has worked with the town in putting articles on the warrant as far as like technology things, buying new computers, things like that. So it's my understanding that those things are not part of the budget, they go on top of the budget.
It used to be part of the budget, and then many years ago, during a financial constraint, we pulled it out and we funded it separately in an article, and that's how we've done it. We have yet to receive the official request for this year, though, so we'd like to receive it so that we can meet with you in the next week or so,
And talk about
if you don't mind.
And talk about it.
Yeah.
So
you guys need to talk about it actually before.
No, right,
Yeah.
right. But, so that was part one. And part two is just to kind of mention that sometimes the one-time purchases have unintended consequences. So everybody knows my spiel about the Chromebooks and the thorn in my side that I have about it. But I notice every year in here, there's Wi-Fi upgrades going on. Now we're talking about a tech person added to the budget. They're all, hardware and software.
On the town side.
Oh, the town.
But it's shared with the school bus.
But it's at the elementary school. This isn't, okay.
I thought we were having a general discussion about budgets in the schools.
I was just getting confused about thinking you were
Making a general point that these things have consequences, and so the hardware and software that come along with all these things, like, it's wonderful that we want to be on the cutting edge of technology, but when it comes to priority and making our kids, with their education, is that really something that we need to be careful about looking into the future when it comes to these type of things, because they can have unintentional financial consequences, is the point I'm trying to make. Didn't come out very eloquently, but that's the point I'm trying to make.
Sorry, Laura.
That's okay. You okay?
I'm close to passing out, so.
Okay, that's not.
It's worse.
All right, so I'm gonna keep this as brief, and I'm not saying this to pile on, but there's been some conversation around what is allowable usage in the schools of personal devices that may draw bandwidth from the school's wireless infrastructure. And I would just like if the superintendent could clarify what the policy is in the schools around personal devices.
Okay. I guess it depends on who are you talking about, and what do you mean by personal devices?
So cell phones, iPods, tablets, things that are not Chromebooks,
Sure.
that belong to an entity in the classroom, whether it be a teacher, student, aide, other, that would, if turned on and left in their pocket, backpack, purse, draw internet use, and therefore lower the capacity of other wireless devices that the school needs for the one-to-one technology ratio.
So, the system that we have in all the schools is password protected. So you need a password in order to get on and use it. If you come in, and not everybody gets the password, and we have a guest network as well that we change the password on a regular basis. If you come in with a cell phone, for instance, and you don't have the password, on a regular basis, your cell phone is going to ping any available network that's out there to see if it can gain access. That has a very short but intense use of the system. That's really not what's driving our need to expand the system, but rather it is the devices that we're authorizing people to use on a regular basis. At this point in time, we are not a bring your own device school, so you have to use a school authorized device. In the case of Halifax Elementary, it's sort of a combination of some iPads, some Chromebooks, and some laptops. And that really is all dependent on what technology seems, or what device seems to make the most sense for the person who's using it.
Okay, and I asked the question for two reasons.
Sure.
One, having attended the 6th grade orientation, Mr. Benvey made it very clear that if kids had their cell phone and called their parents because they weren't feeling well, that was a no-go, and they should not have those devices on them. So is that also the policy at the high school, that kids should not carry them, or is it different?
High school has a different policy.
Okay, so I followed that up with this. At the February meeting, I believe a Kingston school committee representative asked if there could be a staggering of the wireless ports, so that I believe one port, and again, this is by memory, one port supported 30 devices, and the request was a one port per classroom upgrade, and the request, or the question posed by the school committee member was, could that be staggered, have one every other classroom to help kind of stem the cost and make it a little bit more gradual to eventually get to the one-to-one classroom. The response I believe provided, and I don't want to misquote the tech director, was that that wasn't realistic because of the personal devices that would draw that bandwidth, and I just am looking for clarification on that.
The desire to have an access point that will accommodate 30 simultaneous users is built around really what is expected to be a full classroom.
But our classrooms aren't at 30 students,
but
and we're trying to keep them at under 30.
we're trying to keep them under 30, and in fact, we're looking at, in the high school, it sort of depends on the class, but for the most part, we're looking in the 20s.
Okay. It just seems a conflict in ask.
And over time, but that plan to increase wireless, the density of wireless access points is something that's talked about being rolled out over time, not all at once.
Okay.
And like any technology, how it actually get used, how successful it is when it gets used, and what the spec sheet says it will do, and the physical conditions of the building, the amount of brick and steel and metal is going to make a difference to how effective it is. So it would be rolled out sort of slowly, and we'd make adjustments as necessary, depending on the condition of the unit and the actual usage.
Thanks for the clarification.
Anybody have anything they want to say?
So are we talking about capital budgets today?
Just in general with the schools. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Sorry I'm not feeling good. I feel like a council you guys.
So do we want to wrap it up with some kind of agreement on a percent that we feel comfortable with? Or we discussed it and we're...
You didn't really discuss much the elementary school.
No.
We went back and forth
Yeah.
and talked about, sort of like, we didn't really talk about the elementary school. So I'll ask the same question. Does your elementary budget, with the exception of the IT person, half the IT person, reflect what Charlie's directive was for the budget? So it's only things that, steps and lanes, and any expense, like you lost a grant, so that's in there. So it only represents the thing, the directive that was in the memo. Yeah.
It does.
Okay. So, you guys have to finish going through the other department budgets as well, but if that honestly reflects that, then we need to wait and look at the deficit and then finish the conversation, I guess. I mean, that's just my advice. Unless you have a different feeling on it.
Mr. Chairman, we're meeting again Wednesday night.
Yep.
We kind of have a policy of not going past 9:30. Here we are.
Can you join my committee?
Try to keep it on the same date.
So before we wrap up, do any of the members that came, again, thank you for coming tonight, do any of the school committee members have something they'd like to say about the budget or anything?
Just to reiterate, we have not yet voted on it, and we have made cuts from version 1 to version 2, and I expect we'll discuss that at our next meeting, and come up with the fairest and most, balanced and equitable budget we can come up with that, considers all concerns.
I have a question. Has the school committee gone and met with the other town finance committees and had this kind of conversation?
We just came from Clinton, that's what we
This evening?
Yes. This is the fourth one. Depends on if you're speaking, this is too.
And what was kind of the outcome of those? I don't want to hear a whole hour and a half, sorry, but.
Clinton's struggling also.
And I think that they may be further behind in their budget process.
So both schools see a large increase in Clinton as well? Well, it's still like assessment wise.
So,
We see a large number from the number calculated. How about their elementary?
there's an increase in sped, and Clinton has vocational education students. So it's like 100,000 addition for vocational students. The actual day budget is not up very much at all, but with the application sped and then the vocational making up the back.
So are they, I guess in a funding, it's the way that the school department has to spend money. What's the first item, like, is it special needs tuition and transportation, then vocational, then regular day? Like what do you have the least amount of control over, I guess?
Vocational.
So those two are like right off the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
By
That's
law,
why
by law in
it's line.
Massachusetts, if you live in a community and you want a vocational education, and it is not available in your home district, Silver Lake has 6 programs. It's not one of those 6 programs. You have the absolute right to go to any vocational school in the Commonwealth, and your community has the absolute obligation to pay for the cost of that tuition, which is set by the state, as well as transportation. That has to happen.
So here we have a big special ed, out-of-district special needs increase in the tuition and transportation. They have not as big, but they have an increase.
Yeah.
Then they have an increase in vocational students.
Yes. That's almost 100,000. It is 100,000.
They have number 2.
We're still talking about.
And
I mean, it was different.
And if I could say, it's, you know, out-of-district vocational and out-of-district sped are items that we work very hard at. But in the end, there are services that are required and services that need to be provided for. And it is sometimes the luck of the draw. I mean, last year in Plimpton, we start the year off in every community with a list of names, what their placement is now, what we expect it to be next year, what we believe it's going to cost, and how we think they're going to fare as the year goes on. Last year, we did that in Plimpton, as we do every year, and we gave money back at the special within the annual because, much like we did with vocational here recently, we had names next to those expenses, and people changed their minds. In the case of Plimpton last year, people left town, they moved, and with them went the financial responsibility for those special ed students. This year, people moved, a different group of people have moved in. That's how that goes up and down.
You know, and we've had a practice in Halifax of not allowing special needs to hurt the elementary school. So what we've had to do, and we might have to do it again this year, is we don't really fund the whole special needs transportation and tuition budget, but we assure the school committee that we will make up the deficit at the special town meeting in May. Because if we don't have the money now, we don't have the money. But we generally have the money turned back at the end of the year that we can use.
So out of the 3 towns, Plimpton's the worst financial hit. At this point in time,
I'd say that they're at least far, I wouldn't characterize them in worse shape, I'd say they're at least far along in their budgeting process. And Kingston, by the way, there is no increase in special, out-of-district special education. Sorry.
Sorry.
I guess that's good for them.
Yes.
I've been thinking that since special ed can fluctuate so dramatically, I wonder if we should kind of fund it like we do the highway department, where we put aside an amount every year so that we've got a little buffer. And then when there's a year where it's high, we have money to draw from. And when there's a year when it's low, we can keep putting that money in.
They call that a stabilization fund.
Yeah.
In some communities.
Well, but like the highway department, we're not doing it like a stabilization fund. We're putting money into the highway department for roads, right? What,
Yeah, that's
how
what-
much is it? 100?
But it's different.
Oh, that's different.
That's a state program.
No, what she's saying, we put 150 aside
Yeah.
every year.
Right.
And it isn't necessary to, mostly because the projects are no longer $150,000 projects.
Right.
We may have to wait 2 or 3 years to accumulate enough money. Now, that's entirely different
I
because
was going to say that. We can't do that here.
that's sort of a cycle in the sense of setting aside money and eventually every 2 or 3 years spending it.
Yeah.
It's a
Then we
mix of,
have to turn it back.
it's a mix of everything. No, we don't turn it back.
No, I mean the school.
Well, no, but I understand, basically what you're talking about though is a stabilization fund.
Yes.
So that
Right.
you put money in every year if you're under budget, in the sense of you put more, if the amount goes down below what your norm is, then you put more money into your stabilization. In years where it's going to be an overage, you take it back out. Of course, you still got to predict what the norm is.
Yeah.
So,
There are communities now that have started special education stabilization funds for
Yeah.
that very reason. My experience is when you look over the long run, the budget creep for out-of-district special education runs at about the same rate as general education. The difference is that one of our school committee members described it at the school committee meeting, special education doesn't look like a gentle increase.
Right.
It looks like a sine wave.
Exactly.
It goes up and
Yeah.
down. When you average it all out, it's just fine. The problem is living through the up cycles. The
Right.
down cycles, we all can adjust to pretty well. That works great.
Yeah.
So,
We
yeah,
know.
it's becoming more common in some towns.
I don't know, we didn't make much progress tonight. I guess when we meet on Wednesday, we go through and look at the numbers that have come in. So right now, at the elementary school, we have the numbers that you guys looked at cutting from last meeting. That's in here. And we have a level funded Silver, so we can update to the version 2.
Funded Silver Lake assessment for Halifax.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Not assessment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What she asked?
No, I said that we have the updated numbers for the elementary school from what they talked about but didn't vote. And we can update the number for the Silver Lake assessment for Halifax.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else? We have the updated number for out of district vocational, updated as well.
It can change up to April 1st now.
Yeah, that's
Until
what
April 1st.
we talked about that. So we have. And do you feel comfortable with 65% of circuit breaker?
Yes.
You do?
65% is the number that has been suggested that we use.
Yeah.
From GESE.
It came
Awesome.
from,
Would you be able to just run that number for us and send it to Sandy so we can just update it for now?
And if you could send it to me also, because Sandy will be out tomorrow. She's still at school. If you're sending it tomorrow, send it to me, and I'll get it to the finance.
Are there any other items that we should be aware of? I need to take more biking in before I come to this meeting.
I think Wednesday night, we're going to have to respond to her request to at least let her know exactly what our decisions are on the two budgets so that they know where they are.
Good.
At least the Silver Lake one, so that, you know, when we go into the meeting on the 30th, I think the 26th, we know where we need to be,
Okay.
at least for the town of Halifax.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else? Does the newest member want to make a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.